Hey, this is Miles Crosby along with Barry Moore from the Press and Standard, PRTC and I-93.7. Once again, broadcasting live for the Meet the Candidates for Sheriff School Board in South Carolina House District 121. As a matter of fact, we've got Michael Rivers and James Broderick. They'll be once again competing for the South Carolina House District 121 seat. And we're getting things underway. Once again, we're doing it alphabetically. All the candidates have, all the candidates have seen these questions earlier. Each candidate will be asked the same question. And we're going to start off with Mr. Broderick, James Broderick. Mr. Broderick, why do you feel you're the best candidate to be a state representative?
Well, first of all, I want to send my thoughts and prayers out to everyone that's been negatively affected by Hurricane Matthew. We are a good, tight-knit community, and we'll get through this with everybody's thoughts and prayers. First of all, I want to start out by saying that I've been blessed in my life with many opportunities in employment and experiences in education. I possess a bachelor's degree in resources management, a master's degree in management, a master's degree in counseling, and a master's degree in educational administration. Also, I've been in the Air Force and had the opportunity to travel overseas and see how different cultures live. Now, to come back to my experience, I'm currently on Walterboro City Council, and I've been on City Council for 3 years. I'm the only candidate for House District 121 that has experience in legislating laws. I have to develop them, research them, debate them, and vote for them to become laws within the city. And it is a process that needs to be learned, and I've had the opportunity to do that in the last 3 years. I've also had the opportunity to meet many people in Beaufort and Colleton County, and I am a resident of Colleton County, and we need to keep this seat in Colleton County to get what we need in the State House. Another thing I want to bring up is what makes me a good candidate for this position is the party that I'm running under. The Republican Party is currently the majority party in Columbia. And with my ability to be in that party, I'll get the committee appointments and be able to work with the majority party in Columbia to get laws passed that will affect us positively in this area. And I also look forward to working with Miss Margie Bright, Senator Bright, our current senator from Colleton County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broderick. Once again, Mr. Rivers, it will be the same question. Why do you feel you're the best candidate to be state representative?
Well, I believe I'm the best candidate because my experience being on the school board since 1998, and Broderick may not have known about that, but I've been on the school board since 1998. So developing policies and knowing how the intricacies of the government, I've been there and I know how to do that. But more importantly, this election is about we the people of Beaufort and Colleton County to form a more perfect union between the two counties, because the only thing that really separates us is water and trees. Our needs are the same. The ability to work with people on the school board in Beaufort for the last 18 years, it's nonpartisan. And I believe that when it comes down to doing the right thing, 2 + 2 is going to always be 4. And when you're doing what is right, you can represent everybody. And I know I'm the right person at the right time, and I'm the right choice. You know, my mom said something to me years ago. She said, son, you can always better your best. And I think Mr. Broderick, you know, he's a good candidate, but when it comes down to good, better, and best, I'm the man.
Thank you very much. Question for Mr. Rivers. What experience, job and/or personal, would qualify you to be state representative?
Well, like I mentioned, I've been on the school board now since 1998. But one of the best jobs I think that qualifies me is my upbringing. Yes, I've been in the Air Force. Yes, I did accounting in the Air Force. Yes, I worked at Scientific Atlanta. Yes, I was the first person to construct all the land satellites and all of the cable stuff that you see from Scientific Atlanta. But my most important lesson in life was growing up as a country boy, catching water off the housetop to wash off with. And some of you in here may not know about, slop jaws and all that kind of stuff. So I am intimately aware of the challenges that face our area. And not only did I work in the Air Force and electronics, I'm also a preacher. And most importantly, I love people. And James said something about Republican, Democrat. At the end of the day, if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And quite frankly, we have to have people up there that can work with Senator Bright. For instance, politics, for me, is a very bad word, because politician has a way of getting elected, and once they become elected, then they flip to do whatever is best for them, and they forget who they really work for, which is the people, we the people. And the roads here needs to be done, because we're going to get the port, and driving from Beaufort up 303, and the reason I'm saying that, politicians, when we had the opportunity to get help from the federal government a few years ago with infrastructure building, because of politics, everybody said they didn't want it. But then we had 2 years in a row with the flood and the hurricane, and everybody wants to help because it's convenient, but if had we been getting help all the time, maybe we wouldn't be in the trouble we're in.
Mr. Rivers, Mr. Broderick, same question. What experience, job and or personal, would qualify you to be state representative?
Well, first of all, I grew up in a family with 8 siblings. And in my household, we had to learn to negotiate and come to consensus, or my mother wasn't happy. And that made things difficult in the house. My work experience has given me a depth of understanding of what we can do and how government works and how we can make things work. While I was in the Air Force, I was a maintenance manager. I scheduled everything on the base. I had to work with hundreds of people and millions of dollars of equipment and make sure that it all came together and worked. That's something that I can bring to the government and in the State House. I've been a banker. I understand finance. I understand how budgets work. And boy, do we need some help with our budgets in the State House. I'll bring that knowledge to the State House. I've also been a social worker, that I've worked at the Department of Social Services, and our Department of Social Services has had some difficulty in its reforming, and I understand how our children, our vulnerable children, can be affected by our policies and laws that are set by the state, and also our vulnerable adults and our citizens that are in need, our families. I've been an alcohol and drug counselor where I've really learned to hone my listening skills, because being a representative requires you to listen, not to talk, to listen, and to understand what your constituents need from Columbia. I've had the blessing to work in the education system for the last 17 years. I haven't been a policymaker in education. I've been the one in the trenches doing the work. I understand how our funding is messed up in Columbia, and I can put that to work going there. I understand the red tape that is put in front of us as educators, and we need to get that back down to the classroom where our teachers need our support.
Thank you, Mr. Broderick. And the next question will be to you first as well. What do you feel is the biggest problem in Colleton County that can be addressed at the state level?
Well, first of all, we just went through Hurricane Matthew. We need to get things back together from Hurricane Matthew. And I want to give a shout out to all of our law enforcement and public works people and our firemen that helped rebuild everything and get everything back together. That's still going to be a process. One of the first things I'll address in Columbia is working to make sure that our local government fund is fully funded. A lot of people don't know about it, but our local governments get money from the state, and we're capped at what we can put out on property taxes. And that has only been funded at 70% for the last 8 years. And it makes it difficult for local governments and the counties to provide the services to our citizens. And one example is the services they just supplied to us by the equipment and the personnel that were here to clean up after the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew. That's why it's important. And also that we need to make sure that we give that money to the county so they know how best to use it, and the cities, and to make sure that we have the firefighters and the policemen and the equipment that they need to properly serve our public.
Mr. Rivers, it will be the same question. What do you feel is the biggest problem in Colleton County that can be addressed at the state level?
One of the biggest things, as I see it, is fairness. Too oftentimes, people in the Low Country, Colleton County, Beaufort as well, but Colleton County, you pay your taxes and you don't get the services. And the flip side of that is, a lot of times politicians will use that word taxes to try to massage the conversation, but when you put it in terms of revenue, expenditures, and services, then that reduces the argument to real talk, because services are what we are elected to provide services to our constituents, but services has a cost. In a natural doing business day to day, I think our cost may go up like maybe 1.5% a year. That's the natural cost of doing business. And a lot of times politicians, to get themselves elected, they will keep telling you how they're going to cut. But let's do it. 2 + 2 is 4. If you got X amount of people and it's at this price, and you have X plus at the same price, that's a deficit, because the expenses are going to go up. And if revenue does not go up proportionately, just do the math. And oftentimes, politicians will say things in a meeting like this to make you think that once they get to Columbia or wherever, they're going to continue to do the same thing, but you're going to get the same results. So the biggest thing is fairness. We're about to really become a mecca, so to speak, because with the port that's coming in, it's not optional. Our roads has to be fixed, because the roads then it leads to jobs, and then the jobs leads to education. So I think one of the biggest things in Columbia now is the people that's going to speak for the people and not necessarily just for a party or some carved out constituency group, because we're all in this together. This hurricane should let us all know that parties are what they are. We started out way back when Democrats used to be Republicans, now Republicans are Democrats. Let's just be people.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers, and you are the first to answer the next question. What are your top 3 priorities should you be elected?
Well, my agenda is really what I call a POP agenda, people over politics. And I keep saying that because a lot of times people will use politics over people to get themselves elected. And so my main 3 things are, 1, like I said earlier, roads. Secondly, jobs and education. And they all tie in together. And we have to be thinking about not just now, but we got to think about the children who is coming in maybe 10, 15 years from now. And sometimes we can become selfish in our comfort level today and lose sight of what the children are going to need tomorrow. And so the main thing again is roads, jobs, education, and fairness. Too many times we who are in the Low Country are seen as votes, but then we don't get the services after the election is over. And I'll say this, politicians, poly means many, ticks mean blood-sucking insects. I'm an elected official. I've been one since 1998. I am courageous. I will never sell you out. I will never flip on you. I won't flip party on you. I will always work for the people, because ultimately, without the people, we don't have a job. And this is not a black issue. This is not a white issue. It's a right and wrong issue, because we live in District 121 as we the people of this district. How do we form a more better union between us? And in order to talk, you got to listen, because you got to be able to answer what is being said. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Broderick, the same question. What are your top 3 priorities should you be elected?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Mr. Rivers, we are politicians, whether you like the title or not. That's what we are. We're politicians. My top three priorities in going to Columbia will be, first of all, to create good-paying jobs for our citizens. Beaufort and Colleton County are in need of good-paying jobs. We lose too many of our young people to other areas because there's nothing here for them to stay or nothing here for them to come back to. Beaufort County is especially hit by that. They have a drain of young people from Beaufort County, and we need to bring those jobs here and supply them so we can raise our families and have good futures. Next, I'll work on ensuring that our teachers and our school staff have the funding and resources that they need to educate our children. We've heard that over and over again. We heard it with the school board, people running for the school board earlier. And we need to make sure that all of our children have the opportunity to succeed. And we need to do that by getting what we need to the classrooms. The teachers know what they're doing, and they know what they need to do to educate our children. And then lastly, third on my list would be making sure that our infrastructure, not just roads, bridges, but our utilities. Our utilities in our cities are old and they're decaying. And we need to make sure that there's funding and grants available to keep those up and healthy for our communities. If we tie all that in together, if we have good infrastructure, we have a good educational opportunity for our youth, we will bring businesses to Beaufort and Colleton County, and we will keep our children here and grow our citizens, which is what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broderick. And we're going to move into the 3-minute summation part of the program. And Mr. Rivers, you'll be up first. So once again, Mr. Rivers, Michael Rivers, your 3-minute summation. Thank you.
Yeah, this season that we're living in is so fantastic, so dynamic. And just like we've just changed from summer to fall, we have an opportunity now to have a representative in Columbia that's going to put people over politics. People over politics. You know, we talk about jobs, and sadly, sometimes when you're in a service environment, there are some who, sometimes business people, who prefer the jobs to be at a low wage because their profit margin then is higher, so they don't really, they're not, sometimes it's not a concern about the turnover because they know they can get somebody else doing that same job for a low wage. That's why I'm excited about the court coming in. That's why I'm excited about this new atmosphere that I think is going to be in Columbia, where people are going to be the main reason and the main agenda rather than politics and being cushy with this group or that group, because ultimately we work for you, the people. My experience in life, from a country boy growing up, going into the military, into accounting, going to electronics, being a public servant for these many years, I'm well versed. Life hasn't always been days where the sun has always been shining. There have been rainy days too. So that lets me identify with the constituency of Colleton County as well as Beaufort. Sometimes people want the people on the top to be their friends, and then when they get elected, they forget about the people on the bottom. I am for everybody. I am eminently qualified. My experience says so. I challenge anyone to look at the Beaufort County School Board, my voting record, and see what it is. So I know this season is an opportunity for us to do great things in Columbia, and I welcome the opportunity to do that. You know, and for instance, we talk about politicians. In Beaufort, the education funding is being zapped really in this area because of Act 388, where funding is not being given to the schools like they should. But at the end of the day, we either going to grow together as people. The days of being separated based on the package on the outside, those days are over. What we should be looking for is what's inside the package and what can best represent all of us, because anybody can dress by outside of the package, but the inside is what tells the story, and out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And I know God has opened this opportunity, not just for me, but for us, so that we the people can have a representative in Columbia. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers. And up next, once again, Mr. James Broderick. Mr. Broderick, your 3-minute summation, please.
First of all, I want to say in Columbia, I'll represent everyone. Everyone needs a voice in Columbia. And I've proven that since I've been on city council. You can look around Walterboro and see the progress that we've had in the last few years. And that's because we work together as a good council, and the legislation that we do in making of the laws works, and it makes our city prosper and our area will prosper. I'll bring that to Columbia as well. Our education system, the funding, Mr. Rivers talked about Act 388. I think before we even talk about Act 388, we need to look at the mess that we have of antiquated funding for the school districts. We have acts that were created back in the 1970s, and there's 3 or 4 or 5 different areas that we have to look at for funding. I experienced that as an administrator. I know how difficult it is to use those funds. We need to look at those, realign them, and get the money down to our school districts so they can spend it the best way it needs to be on our children in their districts, and stop holding that money in Columbia. Again, Columbia's had surpluses for the last few years. We need to stop that piggy bank that they have there. That money needs to go to the counties and the municipalities where it's going to be spent on what our citizens need. And I'll work on that in Columbia. Also, I'll use my skills in debating and compromise to get things through and work with the parties and across the aisle and get things done. I'll work hard for you. You can count on that. I'll work every day for you. I won't miss sessions like what happens. And I'll make sure that everyone in our district is represented and taken care of in Columbia. And I'll listen to you. I'll be involved in the community as I am. And I'll make sure that you know that I'm there for you, like I was after Hurricane Matthew and went out and checked on our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broderick. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our candidates tonight for the South Carolina House District 121, Mr. James Broderick and Mr. Michael Rivers. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another